Every day we hear TikTok is a threat to the future of America, and that it's destroying the lives of our children and the fabric of our society. Anti-China hawks in Washington assert it's a tool controlled by the Chinese government, who can use it to divide the US. But what if there was another technology from China that could truly affect the life and well-being of every single American? It's a rapidly advancing field with a global market size of over $1 trillion, and how we deal with this technology will have a much bigger impact on our society than TikTok ever could. I'm talking about China's biotech, a technology so advanced it easily has the capacity to completely change the face of global health as we know it. US lawmakers have labeled it a national security threat and passed new legislation to ban American scientists from working with Chinese companies. But what you probably don't know is that American biotech companies have been collaborating with China for decades. It's because scientists are able to put politics aside and focus on what they love most, working together to find solutions for the world's most complex problems. Senator Rand Paul, who has been an outspoken critic of the TikTok ban, also spoke out against this new legislation. "My worry is that anger and disengagement from China ultimately is going to be caught up in protectionism and lead to higher prices for the American consumer." In today's video, I'm going to break down the truth about the biotech industry and make the case on why the US and China should continue their decades-long collaboration effort. The truth is incredible and not what you expect. Let's break it down. We'll start today's analysis by asking you a simple question. How many diseases do you think exist in the world today? According to the latest research, a conservative estimate is roughly 10,000 diseases. But take a look at this chart from the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, and on average, there are only 50 drugs approved for use each year. On average, the process takes 12 years, costs over $2 billion, and fails 90% of the time. To get 55 drugs approved last year, pharmaceutical companies globally spent over 10 years and $110 billion. This is the first thing you must understand about the biotech industry. Both the US and China have incredible scientists who can produce excellent research. Science and research are never the problem, but acquiring enough funding to support the research remains the biggest obstacle for all biotech companies worldwide. Sharing risk, expenses, and infrastructure will result in acceleration of global biotechnology and increase the number of innovative drug approvals. It literally benefits everyone on the planet when scientists from the US and China work together in biotech. But this actually goes much further, because the United States benefit more than any other country by collaborating with China. They do so for two main reasons. The first is the US has the most expensive healthcare system in the world. Nearly 1/5 of US GDP is spent on healthcare. That's over $5 trillion. The second reason is China has more scientists than any country in the world. And this makes complete sense. China is a nation of over 1.4 billion people, so naturally, China will have more doctors and scientists than the US. But here is where things get interesting. China is now the leading producer of scientific research, producing roughly 25% of all scientific papers published worldwide. China also produced 30% of the top 10% and 1% of the most cited publications. What this simply means is that Chinese scientists are producing some of the world's best scientific research. And if US scientists are blocked from working with their Chinese counterparts, then Americans simply won't have access to the best data in the world, once again making the difficult journey of developing new medicines that much harder. But here is where things get potentially very worrying for the United States. Recently, Foreign Policy published this article entitled "Chinese Scientists Are Leaving the United States." The article goes on to state how worsening US-China relations are complicating academic collaboration and could hamstring Washington's long-term tech ambitions. The simple fact is that America is a nation built on immigrants and has always been open to collaboration. But many Chinese scientists don't feel welcomed inside the US and are leaving. This is a dangerous trend for the US and a topic I've discussed multiple times here on YouTube in the past. Once again, it's worth repeating my quote that is the backbone of this YouTube channel. When the US and China work together, the whole world wins. When it comes to science, all of humanity depends on a good working relationship between the United States and China. But now, let's take a further look into why the Chinese biotech industry is so important for the future of our world. Once again, it is directly related to the massive size of China's population, because many rare diseases are not that rare in China. Let me explain. According to the European Union, a rare disease affects less than 1 in 2,000 citizens. These diseases are difficult to fund and study in the West because there simply aren't enough patients to enroll in clinical studies. However, with 1.4 billion people, 1 in 2,000 means there are over 700,000 patients in China. That's a huge amount of data and a great test market for clinical trials. In fact, a group of patients this size from China would have a population larger than 69 other countries in the world. This is why the Chinese market is vital for the future of medical research. In fact, over the past 2 decades, several new cancer therapies were discovered and developed in the West, but clinical studies throughout China played an important role in their development. Many of the latest immunotherapy drugs were discovered, perfected, and made cheaper and more accessible to patients worldwide thanks to China's biotech industry. In reality, China is becoming a global innovator in oncology, which is the study and treatment of cancer. Take a look at this article from the SCMP. China's world-leading cancer drug makes historic foray into the US amid medicine crisis. This is a fascinating case study and shows once again why the US and China should collaborate more in the future. A Shanghai biotech company developed a new drug to treat a specific type of throat cancer. This is the first and currently only drug that is approved by America's Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, to treat this type of cancer. But why is this important for America? Because the White House recently announced the US is facing a shortage of 15 cancer drugs due to manufacturing and supply chain issues. To replace the lost supply, the FDA has turned to manufacturers outside the US. And guess which country is making the largest gains outside of the US? You guessed it, it's China. Take for example MGI Tech, one of the leading companies in the world for DNA sequencing technology. Without getting too technical, gene sequencing is the cornerstone of medical research, as it shows scientists the entire genetic makeup of a specific organism or cell type. In 1990, scientists from 6 countries started the Human Genome Sequence Project. They spent 13 years mapping the first human genome at a cost of nearly $3 billion. Today, MGI reduces the cost of gene sequencing to a mere $100. In 30 years, we've gone from a cost of $3 billion to only $100. This is an absolute game changer. And with the now affordable cost of sequencing, many new clinical applications can be opened, resulting in better treatment, advances in longevity, and groundbreaking new medicines and vaccines. But the benefits also extend down to the people who need it most in society. Today, in the United States, an estimated 44% of adults are struggling to pay for healthcare. Cheaper genome sequencing makes essential genetic screening tests available to those with a low socioeconomic status. These tests provide important information about the genetic carrier status of people and also their children's genetic risks. With more accurate diagnosis, precision medicine powered by genome sequencing can find inherited preconditions and help monitor the health of our tissues. The key thing here is that it will significantly reduce the financial burden of both patients and the economy. Naturally, all this progress and innovation in China has frightened the United States. Earlier this year, the Select Committee on the CCP went after the biotech industry and introduced multiple bills, such as the Biosecure Act, which will ban federally funded US scientists and medical providers from working with or buying equipment and services from certain Chinese biotechs. This bill directly names some of the most promising and innovative Chinese biotech companies and could effectively ban them from some of the biggest projects in the US market. WuXi AppTec is one of the major pharmaceutical companies included in this bill, despite the fact this Chinese company merged with a US company in 2008. Once again, our politicians are targeting a company that employs thousands of US citizens and actively manages 12 research facilities in the United States alone. Companies like WuXi AppTec are important because they offer a broad range of R&D and manufacturing services that enable the pharmaceutical and healthcare industry around the world to advance discoveries and deliver groundbreaking treatments to patients. But once again, it's no surprise the US committee wants to ban them. In fact, it's the same committee which introduced the bill to ban TikTok. Until now, we've heard nothing but allegations against TikTok and not a single piece of credible evidence showing any national security risk. Unfortunately, US politicians are quick to label anything from China as a national security threat. You know we've reached the level of paranoia when coffee makers and garlic have been labeled as national security threats from US senators. One piece of advice I always give is to follow the moves of the business world. For example, US politicians have been preaching the US must decouple from China economically for a better future. But just last month, the CEOs of some of America's largest companies, including FedEx, Blackstone Group, Qualcomm, MGM Resorts, Broadcom, and Bloomberg visited Beijing. Joining a delegation led from Graham Allison, the founding dean of the Harvard Kennedy School, and Mr. Craig Allen, president of the U.S.-China Business Council. The delegation flew to Beijing to personally meet with China's president and discuss the important future of the U.S. and China. U.S. business leaders realized the importance of America's economic participation with China. That is why this delegation prioritized a visit to ensure the future economic collaboration between the U.S. and China. So now let's turn to the real experts in biotech and listen to their words. Take Rachel King, the former CEO of the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, the largest trade association in the world representing the biotech industry. She states, "This legislation will do untold damage to the drug development supply chain, both for treatments currently approved and on the market, as well as for the development pipelines decades in the making." She continued, stating the bills represent a serious hazard for the biotech industry. This approach would cause significant unintended consequences that would immediately and negatively impact the biotech sector in the US. The reason is simple. Biotech collaboration across nations benefits all of humanity since diseases have no borders. Collaborating with Chinese biotechs not only benefits the US, but also its bioeconomy that is valued at nearly $1 trillion. While the US has long been the world leader in most segments of the global biotech sector, China is quickly becoming a significant player, according to a report from the Brookings Institution. As the gap narrows, cutting off collaboration is not just detrimental from the perspective of US public health, but also economic benefit. As the American US-China Economic and Security Review Commission stated, integration and collaboration run deep, and disrupting these linkages would bring high costs for innovation, US welfare, and public health. Overall, the US biotech sector would lose massively from cutting off ties with China. This hard truth is perfectly captured by Professor Abigail Copland of Vassar College, who specializes in China's biotech industry. In biotech, one cannot maintain competitiveness by walling off others. If you remember anything from today's video, make sure it's this quote. Frankly, Professor Copland perfectly summarizes the actual threat the US faces. The US has become so paranoid about anything from China, scared it will be threatened or outcompeted by Chinese companies, that it would rather eliminate all Chinese competition from the US market, even if it means severely harming America's own innovation and even the health and well-being of its own citizens. Professor Copland adds that it will be a grave mistake for US policymakers to get too obsessed with biotechnology's potential military applications at the cost of blocking efforts to cure diseases and tackle pressing world health issues. I'll leave you with an excellent statement from Senator Rand Paul, which exposes Washington's paranoia and anti-competitive legislation. By banning certain companies, we are advantaging certain other companies. People are taking advantage of anger towards China to do protectionist things for their particular state. My worry is that anger and disengagement from China ultimately is going to be caught up in protectionism and lead to higher prices for the American consumer. By other companies, Senator Paul means the American competitors of these Chinese biotech companies. Banning companies like MGI and WuXi AppTec will only help US companies continue their monopoly in the biotech industry, which will cause higher prices in medical care and research, and the cost will eventually be transferred to the average American consumer. Everyone, it's crucial we understand what China's skyrocketing biotech industries mean for America and humanity. China is making incredible progress in the medical field, and I truly believe it's imperative we maintain an open mindset and a willingness to collaborate with the world's most innovative companies in every industry, but most especially in industry like biotech, which influences the entire world. Once again, remember my quote from earlier in the video. When the US and China work together, the entire world wins. My hope is that our politicians can act more like scientists and doctors who have learned to put political differences aside and work together for a better world. But now it's time to let me know what you think about US and Chinese scientists working together. Drop me a comment down below sharing your thoughts, and as always, I want to thank you for your incredible support, and I look forward to seeing you all in our next video soon.